Okay, so what we're going to do today, I'll just go to my little list. So we're going to be doing a few things today. I will be showing you one of the most amazing things that After Effects does, which is something called trim paths. Um, and what we'll also do is we'll create a trim paths mask as well. Okay. We'll be doing things like parenting one layer to another. Um, then we're going to get into some video work. So essentially, if you shoot video on your phone or via a actual video camera, you can download that and you can use that as elements for your After Effects projects. And so we'll be doing a few things with that video. We'll look at ways in which we can do things like adjust the speed, make it go very fast or very slow, also do a freeze frame with it. But then we'll start doing some playing around with blend modes, much like we can do in Photoshop, but also doing things like a duotone effect as well. We'll be using a program called Media Encoder as well. So if you just start that up and just let it be there, and we'll just make that start. So as I said, we want this Illustrator file, as well as these movie files for our exercises today. So just remembering that use folders and download everything that we are going to use, the assets for the work, in a singular folder so that you are organized and the work doesn't get lost. To show you what might happen, I'll just open up Okay, so this is I was going to show an example of the animation that we can do with that Illustrator file, but the actual Illustrator file is lost. Oh, it's not lost, I just haven't linked it, or it's gone elsewhere, so it's not knowing where to find it. And this is what happens. Any files that you've created as part of your After Effects, if they are in a different place, if you've opened this up on a different computer, this is what happens. And quite simply, it's like an unlinked file in InDesign. It's not there. Okay, and so that is what happens. So the Illustrator file that I use for this, it can't find. Okay, so let's just go to this file that we're going to use. And actually, just to show you what this is, I'll just go to, just look for Ewabi. Yep, that's it. So I don't know, I did this about 8, 9 years ago. And what it is, it was a branding for a electric bikes made out of bamboo. And so this is the branding that I did. What we can see there is that these lines are drawing and undrawing themselves. That's called a trim paths when it's done in Illustrator. And so what we have here is that file. And you can see here that it is a path with a stroke. I've also put caps on it. We can do that elsewhere. And here are the other elements, noting that everything that was animated independently is on its own separate layer. And that is very important. What I've also done, if you notice in the layers, is I've actually numbered those layers. Because when I bring it into After Effects, the layers arrange themselves alphabetically as well as numerically. Okay, and so if you don't name your layers, or if the layers are in their alphabetical order, what would the top layer be? The top layer would probably be E center, then Ewab, then I, then L. I'd have to come in and rearrange all the layers when I'm working on it. Okay? So before I go too far, what I'll also do is I'm just going to copy this hex code, which is the brand color that they use. So just a reminder, when you are creating brands, motion graphics for brands or particular colors, use hex codes as part in your style guide. And that way you just can simply copy and paste it. So I don't need to bring in this shape as a layer. I'll just color my comp that layer. Okay. So I'll come over here and I'll set up a new comp, call this Ewabi 01. I'm going to do a couple of exercises. So just remembering what I have is we're working at HD. Note that my artboard is sized to the dimensions of the After Effects file. Okay, so make it so that when whenever you're doing anything in Illustrator and it's going over to After Effects, size your artboards to the size of the comps that you're going to use. It makes it much easier. And there can be problems if this artboard in Illustrator was smaller than the comp size, because if I scaled this up, it would all go really low res pixely, because it changes it. Okay, so just remember that the sizes are right. We'll do this at 25 frames per second. If I was doing this for Google Ads, I'd do this at 30 frames per second. So whatever your specifications are, you can set. I'll just do this at 20 seconds. And here is my background color. I think that's what I brought over, having done this earlier. And I just paste it in here. And we're right to go. Now, I'm going to bring it in again. So what I might do is I might just save this file as, and I'll bring it in separate. So let's just call this Bedoni. You don't need to do this, all right? It's just that I've already done this demonstration. And let's see where we have it. Oop. There's that file, okay? So this is what I'm going to bring over into After Effects. So File, Import File. Now, please pay attention to how I do this. It is really important. So here's the Illustrator file. Now, generally, the content, the assets we bring into After Effects are things like video footage or sound. And they come in as footage because that's just one flat layer. I want all of my layers to be preserved in this file. So I want them in the exact position as to where they are. So I'll just keep that at composition. I won't choose retain layer sizes. If I do that, all of the assets, all of the layers will be bunched in the exact center of the frame, in which case I would need to move them around and that would be very annoying. We don't tick any of these boxes. We come through. Now, I think this is the one. As I said, I've done this a couple of times. And so what I have are all of those layers. Okay, and you can actually see that the name has come through. This layer is the name of not just the layer, but the Illustrator file. So if that's getting a bit annoying, I can come in and I can rename that. So I will just tap the return key, but the long way around is to right click and come down to rename. And so what I'll do is I'll just delete all the rest of it. And then that way, I can actually see what they are. Okay, so I'm not going to do all of these at the moment, but just so you can see what they are. All right. So I might just delete all of those for the moment. And it's only going to be this one that I'll do at the moment. So even though I threw all those layers away, they're still here in the folder. So if I need them again, I can bring them back in, okay? So this pulse shape is coming at size. Now, this is important. This is where we start changing things. So if I open up that layer, you can see that I only have the 4 basic transformation properties: position, scale, rotation, opacity. Okay, I actually want to change this and play around with this. So we spoke about the Illustrator file in the first week. You know, if I came over and just change the color and saved it, it updates because it's actually the Illustrator file that's in After Effects. Okay, so I'll just undo that and save it again. Go back. So this is where we start doing things. Now, what I need is I need to convert this Illustrator file into vector. Okay, And this is where I can start playing with it. And so what it means is the things we do in Illustrator, we can alter and animate within After Effects. And to do that, it's either I'm hovering over the name of the layer, it'll be a right click or a control click, create shapes from vector layer. Okay, so doing that, look what's just happened. Look at my layers. You can see that I have my Illustrator layer still there, but I've actually got a brand new one. And it has hidden the Illustrator layer. Now, I don't actually need that Illustrator layer. If I need it again, it's still up in my project folder. So I'll just delete. And so what I now have, and you can even see this, is I actually have this shape as a stroke. Okay? So this means that I can start to animate within After Effects. That's all right. Okay, no worries. Okay, so let's just have a look at this. I'm opening up this folder, and now I actually have the contents. Let's open that up. And you can see that I have the color, and also I have those little stopwatch icons, which means that I can animate things like the stroke width. I can animate that. Okay, I won't do that right now because it's already set. Let's have a look at things. So I've got what's called the line cap. So I've brought it in with a round cap, but we have this thing called a beautifully named butt cap, which is just a flat edge. So I can bring in a stroke and give it a round cap on that. I can't actually animate that, but anyway. So there's a few things in there that we'll play with. We'll talk about one of those a bit later where we'll have the taper and we'll animate the taper. Let's just close up the contents folder and let's have a look at where we can actually do the magical animation that we're wanting to do. And by converting the shapes to a vector layer, we now have this pull-out menu with Add. And you'll note that there are other things that we can animate. If I just go to Wiggle Paths, I won't do this. But I can animate the path wiggling if I wanted to. Not that I would. Okay, I'll undo that. But what I'm wanting to do, or even zigzag, just to show you there. So this is a path with zigzags. Again, which I want if I wanted something to wobble or wiggle. Okay, I'm not going to do that. But just know it's there. Undo. What we do want, and you will see this everywhere in motion graphics, is this thing called the trim paths. Okay, so everyone, just stop and pay attention to what we have now. So firstly, I'll just set because I've created shapes with vector layer, I can now center this exactly in the frame. Now let's have a look at what trim paths is. And so what we do have is we have the start and the end. Okay, now for me to actually explain this, it's as simple as this. When I created this vector, the first anchor point was on this far left. That is the start. That is 0%. That's the beginning. Okay? The end, which is the last anchor point I created, is 100%. I'll demonstrate this. But for this path to exist as in its entirety, as we created it, if we want to see all of it, the start needs to be at 0%. The actual end is at 100%. That is the full percentage of the stroke we've just created. Okay? So let's just animate this. Now, because I have created that stroke in its full point, I'm going to the end point, and I'm just going to, at the moment, animate the end only. So I've clicked on the end. I've created a keyframe. I've just put it at the 2-second mark, but I'll be able to alter all of this. And now I'll go back to the 1/2 second point, 12 frames. Remembering, handy hint, always never begin an animation at frame 1. Always begin at least 1/2 second or a second in, and use seconds and 1/2 seconds for the placement of your keyframes. All right, let's have a look and see what happens. So I'm just going to scroll left on the 100%, and look at what happens. Okay, so that the end is now at 0%. So the end is at the beginning. Okay, so if I play this, just tap my return key. It's just drawn itself. Okay. Now, if I were to go 1/2 second further and click on the start, so I've got an anchor point for the start at 0% here, and I'll just go forward another 1.5 seconds, and I'll scroll the start to the end. Okay, so what I've now done is I've begun and finished that line. Now, if I wanted to overlap things, whoops, let's just move these and we'll offset them a little more. So let's see how this works. So the start is going to start animating before it's reached the end. And let's see what happens. Okay, so the start is chasing the end. We'll take it even further. All right. And we can start to do things like we have done last week, which is things like the easy ease. So if I select all of those keyframes and right click on one of those keyframes. I can easy ease it. Okay, so I've pushed it a bit more. Let's see if I can play around with that. Oh yeah, there we go. So remember last week when I was doing this, it was the position which needed the separate dimensions. All the other ones didn't. So now let's see how this works. Okay. We could even put a motion blur on this. So we did that last week as well. So remember, we've got that little motion blur box we can tick, which lives in the first panel. And you can see that we have a bit of a blur going on. All right, and so it starts to get a little bit more interesting. Now, what we can also do, okay, I might just take the ease off for this, just for the sake of seeing what we've got. If I'm just going to zoom right in. All right, so what I've got is one frame difference between the start and the end. Okay, so I've basically got it chasing itself. Now, I'll just talk about this. If I wanted this start, now remember this is a cap. It's got a front cap and a back cap to make it into a circular shape. Now, if I wanted it to start with the cap, I change the end to 0.1. It's basically just a front and an end cap with the tiniest stroke between it. Now, if I ended this at the start at 99.9, it's also ending with a cap. Now, I could start with a fade in there if I wanted to. Okay, and so now it's almost like a ping pong ball moving. All right, so just know that we have a couple of options for how we can bring things on together. Okay, now we'll talk about a few other things. So let's just ease this now. And it's worth doing little experiments to see what happens when you do things. So much testing. Okay, so that's a trim paths. What I'll do just to show you what the trim paths can do, I'll do it to a shape. So I'll just hide that there. I'll just create a new shape layer. So remembering I could bring in a shape from Illustrator too. Let's just make it into a circle. Oh, I'll take the fill off, give it a stroke. Okay. Let's just do a few of those things that we've done. So let's center our anchor point. Not that it really needs to worry at this point, but I'll also just center this in the frame. Now, let's trim path this. Let's see what happens. Firstly, we can come in and I'm going to put a round cap on it. Okay. Not that it means anything at the moment. And let's add a trim paths. And let's do the same thing. So I'll start with the end. And I'll move forward to the beginning. So I'm just going to scroll to start the end from 100% to 0. Okay. All right. See what's happened? Now, if I wanted to push this a bit further, so I'll do a couple of things with this. All right. It'll make sense when we do it. But let's just say that I don't actually want the start to be at the very top. Let's say I wanted it to be somewhere else. It's the offset. So if I change the offset to something like 90 degrees, well, that's a right angle. Okay. Okay, and so we can do this same thing. Animate the start to the end. Okay. So we have, now I might just delete those. So we have our basic one. I just want to show you this one little thing. Okay. So let's just say we're happy with that. Let's say I wanted to actually have two trim paths happening on top of each other. So I'll duplicate this. So just remembering, this also has that trim paths. Okay. I'm hitting the U key so I can see it. I'm just coming into the contents. And just for this, I'll go to the stroke and I'll just change the color. All right. So what I have is it doing the same thing. But if I offset this, so if I grab these ones, look what happens. So I have two trim paths happening on top of each other. Okay, let's just duplicate that one. And we'll go in here. I'll just see what we have. Let's just change this color to green. All right. So there we have how we can play with trim paths. Okay, now you will see this a lot. So just pay attention to your motion graphics. Okay. So with all of that, I think we may, was there anything else I wanted to, oh yes, there was one more thing I wanted to show you. Just in regard to trim paths, just to how this works. I'm just going to create a new shape layer. And I'm just going to make it into a filled shape. Okay, I'll just demonstrate this here. I don't need to worry about the anchor point, it's not relevant. What happens if I try to trim path a shape with a fill rather than with a stroke? So just see what happens. I don't think it's the best result. Okay, so that's what happens when you trim path a fill. It could be something that you want, almost like a windscreen washer going across, riding itself. That could work. All right. So in terms of trim paths, there are a few options. So we've got our path that we've brought in from Illustrator, and we've created shapes from vector layer. We have just generated a shape as a stroke, created the trim paths, then duplicated it and offset the actual keyframe. So it's doing exactly the same thing, but later in time, just changing the colors. And also just with that shape, with that trim path there, but I didn't actually animate that. Okay, so there's our trim path. So how about we just have a little bit of a play with that? What I'll do before the break, I'll show you one more trim pathy thing, okay?